Somewhere in your family tree, there's a person you've never thought about. They lived in this country before it was really this country, before the castles you visit on weekends, before the language you're speaking right now had settled into itself. And I can almost guarantee you've never once wondered whether they existed. Here's the thing, in the autumn of 1066, an army came across the Channel, won a single battle, and took over the entire country in the space of about 20 years. New kings, new lords, new language at the top. We all learned that date in school and then forget it by lunchtime. But the people who were already here didn't go anywhere. They kept farming, kept working, kept passing their names down, and their descendants are still walking around today, millions of them, most with absolutely no idea they're carrying a thread that runs back past the whole thing. So the real question is, are you one of them? Because there are signs, 7 of them. And by the time we hit number 4, you're going to start looking at your own family very differently. Now, before we get into it, if you're the kind of person who finds this stuff fascinating, do me a favor and hit subscribe. This channel is all about digging up the hidden history buried inside ordinary British families, and I'd love to have you along for it. It's free, and it means you won't miss what we uncover next. Right, let's get into it. Sign 1. Your surname comes from a trade. If your last name is Smith, or Wright, or Baker, or Cooper, or Mason, or Thatcher, pay attention, because you might be carrying one of the oldest kinds of name in the whole country. Think about what those names actually are. They're jobs. Somewhere back down the line, a man was a smith, and the job just became him. And the reason that matters is simple. Every single village needed these people long before the Normans ever turned up. You needed a smith to work your metal, a wright to build in wood, a baker to turn grain into something you could eat. These jobs are ancient, which means the words for them are ancient too. They're Old English. The language the Anglo-Saxons were speaking here for 600 years before Hastings. So when you carry a trade name, there's a good chance you're carrying a word that was already old when the Normans landed, handed down parent to child from someone who was already standing on this island, already working, already part of a country that was about to be taken out from under them. Sign 2. Your surname is the name of a place, a small, specific, out-of-the-way English place. Listen to the ending of your name. Does it finish in ton, like Middleton or Preston? In ham, like Oldham or Markham? In lay, like Bradley or Langley? What about Worth or Field or Wood? Because every one of those endings is a little fossil of Old English. Ton meant an enclosure, a settlement. Ham meant a home, a homestead. Lay meant a clearing hacked out of the forest that once covered nearly everything. These are the exact words the Anglo-Saxons used to describe the land they lived on, and they'd already stamped them onto their villages long before any Norman arrived to redraw the map. So if your name ends that way, it's pointing at something real. A village, a patch of ground, a place that existed in Anglo-Saxon England that your family was tied to closely enough that it literally became your name. You're walking around with a 1,000-year-old address. Sign 3. Your family has deep roots in one specific rural corner of the country. Have a think about where your family is really from. Not the last couple of generations. Go further. The villages, the market towns, the bit of countryside, your line keeps circling back to whenever you try to trace it. Here's why that matters. When the Normans took over, they grabbed the top of society, the lords, the big landowners, the seats of power. But the people who actually did the work, they mostly stayed exactly where they were. They had to. Someone still had to farm the land. The villages didn't empty out overnight. The Anglo-Saxon population just carried on, rooted in the same soil, while new masters swapped in and out above their heads. So if your family has that stubborn, deep connection to one rural pocket of England, somewhere your ancestors seem to have clung to for as far back as you can dig, there's a real chance you come from that older stock, the people who stayed put, the people who were already here. Sign 4. The oldest words in the entire language are sitting in your mouth right now, and you've never noticed. This is the one I promised you. And it's strange because it's not in a document or a record somewhere. It's in how you talk today, every day. When the Normans took power, they brought their French with them, and it poured straight into the top of English life. The court spoke French, the law spoke French, the castle and the fine dinner table spoke French. That's why even now, the posh and formal words in English so often turn out to have French roots. But the plain words, the ones you don't even think about, those stayed exactly as they were: house, home, hand, heart, bread, water, love, child, earth, stone, day, night. That's the bedrock of the language, the words ordinary people kept using while the fancy French stuff floated around above them. And here's the tell that proves it, one you use without ever clocking it. Out in the field we raise a cow, an Old English word, but on the plate it becomes beef, a French one. We keep a pig, but we eat pork. A sheep in the field turns into mutton at the table. Why? Because the animal was tended by the English farmer who kept the old word for it, and the meat was served to the Norman lord who used his. That divide is 1,000 years old, and you reenact it every single time you sit down to eat without ever thinking about it once. So if your instinct is always to reach for the short, blunt, plain word, congratulations. You're speaking the language of the people who were here before the Normans. It survived in the mouths of your ancestors, one generation at a time, all the way down to you. Sign 5, and there's no trace of anything Norman French anywhere in your old family lines. Sometimes the clue isn't what's there, it's what's missing. The Normans left a very particular fingerprint on British names, names with a French shape to them: Beaumont, Montgomery, Percy, Mortimer. Names that started with that little D, meaning from, marking out a lord who was named after the land he'd been handed after the conquest. And the first names they brought over with them: Richard, William, Robert, which eventually hardened into surnames of their own. So try this. Trace your family back through every branch you can get to. And if there's simply no French anywhere in it, no D names, no Norman place names, none of that continental shape at all, then that emptiness is telling you something. It suggests your line sat below the level the Normans occupied, not up among the incoming lords, down among the people they were ruling, the ones who were already here when it all kicked off. Sign 6, your roots are Scandinavian, because the Vikings beat the Normans to it. Here's a twist most people miss completely. Before the Normans doesn't only mean Anglo-Saxon. There was another crowd who showed up long before 1066 and dug themselves deep into this island, especially up north and over to the east. The Norse. The Vikings. For generations before the conquest, Scandinavian settlers were farming, living, and marrying their way across a huge chunk of England, and they left fingerprints all over the map. Place names ending in by, like Whitby or Selby, by being the Norse word for a farm or a village, names ending in thorpe, like Scunthorpe. Old Norse words and surnames carried straight over and dropped into the language. So if your family's from the north or the east, and your roots run into names and places with that Scandinavian ring to them, your line may well have been here for generations before the Normans ever set sail, planted by Vikings who got to this island a very, very long time before the conquerors did. Sign 7, Your deepest roots are Celtic, and that's the oldest layer of all. And then there's the oldest sign there is, because before the Normans, before the Vikings, before even the Anglo-Saxons, there were already people living on this island. The Britons, the Celtic peoples who were here first, before almost anyone. When the Anglo-Saxons arrived, these older Britons weren't simply wiped off the map. A lot of them were pushed westward, into Wales, into Cornwall, up into Cumbria, and their bloodlines just kept going. Others stayed put and blended in. And their descendants are still here today, quietly carrying the oldest ancestry in the whole of Britain. So if your family roots run into Wales or Cornwall or the far northwest, if your surname or your line traces back into those ancient western lands, then you might be descended not just from people who were here before the Normans, but from people who were here before nearly everybody, the first thread, the deepest root, the oldest Britain there is. So there you go, 7 signs, a trade name, a place name, deep rural roots, the plain old words still sitting in your mouth, the total absence of anything Norman, a Viking north, a Celtic west, and you don't need all 7. Even 1 is a thread worth pulling, a sign that somewhere back down your line stood a person who watched those ships come in from the older side of history and never once imagined that 1,000 years later you'd be the one still carrying their story around. Now I want to hear from you. How many of the 7 did you count? And more to the point, what's your surname and which part of Britain is your family from? Is it a trade name, a place name ending in ton or ham or by, a line rooted deep in one rural county or reaching west into the old Celtic lands? Drop it in the comments and let's work out together just how far back your family was already standing here. I read every single one, and somewhere down in those comments is a name older than all the rest. Because the next question isn't whether your family was here before the Normans, it's who they were before that, and the answer goes back further than almost anyone imagines. Stay close, we're only just getting started.